I'm standing in the circular driveway of a house I helped pay for but was never meant to enter. My hands are shaking. There's champagne on my dress. Someone bumped into me, but they didn't apologize. No one's looking at me. I'm invisible here, even though I can feel my pulse hammering in my throat. The mansion behind me is gleaming white with columns like something out of a Southern estate catalogue. There are chandeliers visible through the tall windows. Catering staff in black vests weave through a crowd of 200 people, all of them laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating. And my husband of 26 years, just told me I don't belong here. And quote, my mother doesn't want you here. And quote, 6 words. That's all it took. He said it so quietly, like he was telling me the appetizers were running low. His eyes didn't even meet mine. He was looking past me, toward the tent where his sister was holding court, surrounded by well-wishers and family friends who'd known her since she was in ballet lessons at age 4. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What do you say to that? So I turned. I walked down that pristine driveway, past the rose bushes his mother had flown in from some nursery in Oregon, past the valet station, past the people who didn't notice me leave. And that's when everything started to unravel. My name is Diane. I'm 53 years old, and I'm telling you this story today because I need you to understand something. The worst betrayals don't announce themselves. They don't come with warnings or dramatic music. They come in quiet moments, in offhand comments, in the way someone looks away when you're talking, in a sentence spoken so casually that you almost don't register it as a knife going into your back. I met my husband, Paul, when I was 25. We were both working at a mid-sized insurance firm in Columbus, Ohio. He was in claims. I was in customer service. He had kind eyes and a steady job, and he laughed at my jokes, which back then felt like enough. We got married 2 years later in a small church ceremony. His mother, Barbara, wore cream, almost white, which my own mother said was tacky, but I let it go. That was the first time I let something go. Paul and I had 2 kids, Emma, now 24, and Jacob, 22. I worked part-time as a bookkeeper while they were young, then went full-time when Jacob started middle school. We lived in a 3-bedroom ranch in a decent suburb with good schools and a Kroger 10 minutes away. We weren't rich, but we were fine. Or at least I thought we were. Barbara, my mother-in-law, always had a way of making me feel small. Not overtly. She never yelled or insulted me directly. It was more subtle. She'd compliment my sister-in-law, Rachel, on her decorating, her cooking, her everything, and then glance at me with this tight little smile that said, well, we can't all be Rachel, can we? Rachel was Paul's younger sister. She married a cardiologist named Tim. They lived in a sprawling home in an exclusive suburb outside Cincinnati. She drove a Range Rover. Her kids went to private school. And Barbara worshipped her. When Rachel's daughter graduated high school, Barbara threw her a party that cost more than our annual vacation budget. When my Emma graduated, we got a card and a $50 check. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself Barbara was just old-fashioned, that she favored her daughter and that was normal. I told myself a lot of things. But the mansion? That changed everything. It started about a year ago. Paul came home from a Sunday dinner at Barbara's and told me she was selling her condo. She wanted to build a house, her and quote, dream home, and quote, as she called it. Something to leave as a legacy. She was 74 and in perfect health, and apparently she'd been sitting on investments none of us knew about. And quat, she's hiring an architect, and quat, Paul said, pulling a beer from the fridge. And quat, Rachel's helping her design it, and quat, of course Rachel was. Over the next several months, I'd hear updates. The house was going to be in a gated community. It would have 5 bedrooms, a library, a sunroom. Barbara was sparing no expense. And Rachel was so involved. Picking out fixtures and tile and paint colors like it was her own HGTV show. I was never asked for input, not once. But when Barbara needed money, when the budget ran over and the builder wanted another $30,000 for upgrades, Paul contributed. Without asking me. I found out when I was reconciling our checking account and saw a transfer I didn't recognize. And quat, it's for Mom's house, and quat, Paul said when I brought it up. He was watching a Bengals game, barely looking at me. And quat, $30,000, and quat, she needed help. Rachel and Tim contributed too, and quat, Paul, that's Emma's student loan payment for the year, and quat. He finally looked at me then, and quat, my mother raised me, Diane. I think I can help her out, and quat. The conversation ended there. I paid Emma's loan out of our savings and didn't bring it up again. Another thing I let go. The mansion was finished in late September. Barbara planned a grand unveiling party for October 12th, a Saturday. She called it inauguration, and quat, which felt absurd to me, but Rachel thought it was charming. There were printed invitations, a caterer, a bartender, even a florist. Paul told me I was expected to attend. And quat, of course I'll be there, and quat, I said. And quat, I'm your wife, and quat. He nodded, but something flickered across his face. Something I didn't understand at the time. The day of the party, I wore a navy dress I'd bought on sale at Macy's. I did my makeup carefully. I wanted to look put together, even though I already felt anxious. These family events always made me feel like I was performing in a play I hadn't rehearsed for. We drove separately because Paul had to help set up early. When I arrived, the driveway was already packed with cars. I parked on the street and walked up, holding a bottle of wine I'd picked out. The house was stunning. I'll give Barbara that. It looked like something out of Architectural Digest. White brick, black shutters, a sprawling front porch with rocking chairs and ferns, inexpensive planters. Inside, it was even more impressive. Marble floors, a chandelier in the entryway that probably cost more than my car, a sweeping staircase with wrought iron railings. Rachel was standing near the fireplace, holding a glass of Prosecco and laughing with a group of women I vaguely recognized from past holidays. She saw me and waved, but didn't come over. Paul was near the kitchen, talking to his Uncle Gene. I walked toward him, smiling. That's when he saw me. He excused himself and met me halfway, and I could tell immediately something was wrong. His jaw was tight. His eyes were darting toward the hallway where Barbara was greeting guests. And quat, Diane, and quat, he said quietly. And quat, we need to talk. And quat, okay, and quat. He pulled me aside, into a small alcove near the coat closet. And quat, listen, and quat, he said, and his voice was strained. And quat, Mom's really stressed today. This is a big deal for her. And quat, I No, that's why I'm here, and quat. He hesitated. Then, and quat, she doesn't want you here, and quat. I laughed. I actually laughed, because I thought he was joking. But he wasn't. And quat. Paul, what are you talking about? And quat. And quat. She thinks. She feels like you've been negative about the house. She doesn't want any tension today, and quat, negative. I've barely said anything about the house, and quat. She wants today to be perfect, and quat. I stared at him. My husband. The man I'd spent over half my life with, and quat. Are you seriously asking me to leave, and quat. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I felt something crack inside me. Not break. Cracks are quieter than breaks. They're slower, but they're just as dangerous. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry. I just turned and walked out. I sat in my car for 20 minutes. I didn't know where to go. I didn't want to go home. Our home. The one that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else's life. So I drove to a Panera and sat in a corner booth with a bowl of soup one didn't eat. I kept replaying it. The look on Paul's face. The way he said and quat, my mother and quat, instead of and quat, we, and quat. The fact that Rachel got to stay. That Rachel probably helped plan the whole thing. And then, like a dam breaking, I started thinking about everything else. The college fund. When Emma was born, my mom, who passed away when Emma was 6, had set up a small trust for her. $5,000. It wasn't much, but it was supposed to grow. It was supposed to be there when Emma turned 18. But when Emma applied to college, the account was almost empty. Paul said there'd been fees, administrative costs, market losses. I'd believed him. But now, sitting in that Panera, staring at my untouched soup, I started to wonder. I went home and pulled out our old file cabinet. It took me 2 hours, but I found the statements. The old ones, from when Emma was a kid. My mother had named me as the trustee. I'd signed papers. I'd watched the balance grow, slowly, over the years. And then, when Emma was 16, there were withdrawals. 3 of them. 2,000, 1,500, 1,800. All authorized by Paul. I checked the dates, cross-referenced them with our bank statements, our credit card bills. October 2017, Paul and Rachel took Barbara on a cruise to the Bahamas for her 70th birthday. February 2018, Barbara had her kitchen remodeled. June 2018, Rachel's son's bar mitzvah. The money was gone. My mother's money. The money meant for my daughter. And Paul had taken it. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't confront him the next day, either. I did something smarter. I called a lawyer. Her name was Angela Frost, and she came highly recommended by a woman in my book club whose sister had gone through a brutal divorce. Angela was in her early 60s. Sharp as a tack, and she didn't sugarcoat anything. And quat. Do you have documentation? And quat. She asked. I did. And quat. Good. We'll need it. And quat. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly gathered everything. Bank statements, emails, text messages. I found more than I expected. Transfers to Barbara. Payments to Rachel's kids' private school. Why was Paul paying for that? A $10,000 and quat loan and quat to Tim for his med school debt that was never repaid. Paul had been funneling money to his family for years, and I'd been too busy working, raising our kids, keeping our house running, to notice. Angela helped me do something else, too. She helped me find out the truth about the mansion. Turns out, Barbara hadn't been sitting on secret investments. She'd taken out a loan. A big one. And Paul was co-signed on it. Which meant if Barbara defaulted, we were on the hook. And quote, your husband tied your financial future to his mother's vanity project. Without your knowledge or consent, and quote, Angela said. And quote, in Ohio, that's grounds for financial infidelity in a divorce. And quote, divorce. The word hung in the air. I hadn't said it out loud yet, but hearing Angela say it made it real. I didn't go to Thanksgiving that year. Paul went to Barbara's. I stayed home and made turkey sandwiches for myself and watched The Crown on Netflix. Emma called me. And quote, Mom, are you okay? And quote, I'm fine, honey, and quote, Dad said. You weren't feeling well, and quote, something like that, and quote. I didn't tell her yet. I wanted to wait until I had a plan. By Christmas, I was ready. Paul and I were barely speaking. He'd asked me twice what was wrong, and I'd said, and quote, nothing, and quote, because I wasn't ready to show my cards yet. On December 26th, I filed for divorce. I also did something else. I sent an email to Barbara, and to Rachel, and to Uncle Gene and Aunt Patty and everyone else who'd been at that mansion party. In it, I attached copies of the financial documents Angela and I had compiled. I showed them exactly where their beloved Paul had gotten the money he'd been so generous with. From my daughter's college fund. From our joint savings. From money I'd earned. I also explained, in calm and measured language, that I would be pursuing legal action to recover the funds Paul had stolen from Emma's trust. And I made one thing very clear, I was done being invisible. The fallout was immediate. Barbara called Paul, screaming. Rachel called me, crying, saying I was and quote, destroying the family, and quote. Tim threatened to sue me for defamation, until Angela sent him a polite letter, reminding him that truth is an absolute defense. Paul begged me to stop. He showed up at the house, pale and panicked, saying I was overreacting. And quote, overreacting, and quote, I said. And quote, you stole from our daughter, and quote, I borrowed it. I was going to pay it back, and quote, when, and quote. He had no answer. The divorce took 8 months. Paul tried to fight it at first, but once Angela started deposing him, once the bank records were entered into evidence, he didn't have a leg to stand on. I got the house. I got half of his pension. And I got a judgment against him for the stolen funds, enough to repay Emma's trust and cover her remaining student loans. Barbara's mansion. She had to sell it. Turns out she couldn't keep up with the loan payments, and Paul couldn't help her anymore. Last I heard, she moved into a smaller condo near Rachel. Rachel doesn't speak to me. That's fine. I don't miss her. Paul remarried a year later. Someone younger. I don't care. Emma and Jacob. They know the truth now. It was hard for them at first, but they've come around. Emma told me last month that she's proud of me. That meant more than anything. Outro. If you're still with me, thank you. I know this was long. I know it was heavy. But I needed to tell you this because I think a lot of you have felt what I felt. That invisible feeling. That sense that you're doing everything right, giving everything you have, and somehow it's still not enough. That the people you love most are the ones taking the most from you. I spent 26 years making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger. I ignored red flags because I didn't want to be difficult. I swallowed my anger because I thought that's what good wives, good mothers, good daughters-in-law were supposed to do. But here's what I learned. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. And you sure as hell don't owe anyone permission to steal from you, whether that's money, time, dignity, or joy. It's never too late to stand up. It's never too late to say, and quote, no more, and quote. It's never too late to choose yourself. I'm 53. I'm single. I'm living in a house I own outright, and I'm rebuilding a life that's mine, not anyone else's. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not invisible. If you've ever felt like I did, like you were disappearing in your own life, I want you to know you're not alone. And you're not crazy. And you deserve so much more than what you've been given. Take up space. Speak up. Don't let them quiet you. You matter. You've always mattered.